Hello YouTube, all of my CGC followers here on this channel, coming back after quite some time off, and we're going to continue with the series on Harp Warriors. Hopefully I can get everything that I plan to show you guys all in one video, and this will probably be a lengthy video because I do want to take time and show you guys what I do whenever I play, places in the music, chords that I go to. I will be using a lot of chord numbers. If you're familiar with the first few videos where we talked about scale degrees and chords built on those scale degrees, I will be using that a lot. Once we get going into the actual music part of it. We'll just go ahead and start in. If you're familiar with the first part, I talked about the 5 phases, basically, of prayer meeting, and that's my interpretation of it. I was in no way trying to, make Harp Warrior prayer meeting a science, but in order to explain things more clearly, I felt it best if I could provide some kind of a language that I could share with you guys, so that when I said these different phases, you would know what I mean, in reference to parts of the prayer meeting and what music I typically play to go along with that particular phase. So, first thing is, people ask me what key I play for Harp Warriors. It really depends. I like the sound quality and the darkness of F minor. Most people don't play in that key. Most play in A minor. I'll probably go back and forth and just show you a few concepts, because I do like F minor. It opens itself up to a very expressive array of sounds. So we'll just start off, and I'll start in F minor, and then later on I may show you some things in A minor. I know a lot of people prefer that because it's a lot simpler. So we'll start off. As I said in the first video, the first phase is sanctification. So people are coming in, they're getting anointed, you're forming your circle, or they're getting down to pray and going to the labor sanctifying themselves. So we want to play music that creates a sense of brokenness. And really quickly, I'd like to just kind of pause here and just cover something logistic-wise. There will probably be a lot of fade in and fade outs on this video, because I will be going back and forth to my computer to play some rough kind of examples of what I'm talking about. I have a little drum track that I made, so I just want to let you know I'm not trying to break the continuity of the lesson, but there may be some of those throughout this video. So if we're going to be in F minor, and I have a piano and pad on currently. I'm using Logic, and I have the default piano and pad. I just like, it's not too dark, but I just love F minor. Typically what you want to do is put a piano and pad on, or if you just have piano, that's fine. I use a lot of sixths. We talked about intervals. And one of my favorite progressions is to go from the 6th, if we're in F minor, or I guess I'm going to cheat here. And to make things simple, I will just say that we're on a 6, because F minor is relative to A flat. So if we were in A flat, the F minor would be the 6th. So follow me with that logic. And then accordingly, D flat would be the 4. I typically do a lot of chord movement. I've been in some, everybody plays differently. and that goes with every genre, including Harp Warriors prayer meeting. Some people stay on that minor the entire prayer meeting from start to finish. They don't venture to any kind of other chords or anything like that. They just stay there. For me, I find that moving to different chords will enhance what's going on, because like I said in the last video, you want to embody what the people are doing. So if they're climbing up into warfare, you're going to want to do that. If they're being broken and coming and sanctifying themselves, you want to play music accordingly. For me, I like going from the 6 down to the 4. That's another little going from the E flat, and I've got the thumb down here. Again, if it helps you, if I refer to F minor as the 1, then this would be 6, 7, 1. If you prefer, you know, an A flat and call it the 6, then you've got 4, 5, 6. Just depends on how you want to refer to it. But those 6ths, the intervals, they just have such a, I don't know, they can be bright and make the mood happy if you're in major, but then also if you're in minor, they just add, I won't get too philosophical with, you know, the emotions that notes have. I won't get too far into that, but the more you're aware, the more you can employ into your own playing. So I like to do that, and that's usually, and I'll venture from that. I would never play that solid for, you know, 8, 10, 15 minutes and nothing but that while people are sanctifying themselves. That gets monotonous. But I do kind of start off with that. It gives a nice pulse to what's going on. It also is something that's simple that allows a drummer to pick up and follow. So really quickly, I'm going to just play that, and I'm going to play what I have on my computer as just typically something that you would hear if you came to Jeff for a prayer meeting while people were sanctifying themselves and beginning to get under the burden and the intercession is coming. So right now I have a track playing that you can probably hear of drums. I'm not a great key drummer, so bear with my poor example. But if I took what I played earlier and put it on top of this drum track, then that would kind of give you a semblance of what I'm talking about. So we're going to start here. Something light. And those 6 are just giving it just a little bit of brokenness. Just going back from the F minor to the D flat. And you're not too busy. You're not too empty. Just doing enough. I was catching a little C minor right there. I'm going to keep the same progression going from the 6 to the 4, but I'm going to switch keys while doing it. And I love to do that because it just adds a little bit more drama to what's going on. I know I'm talking about this in almost a crude way, but I don't mean to. You really want to keep the, no pun intended, the spirit of what's going on in the prayer meeting in your playing. And I'm going to use this F as a common tone between F minor and D minor. You see, same note. So it's going to seem a little jarring, but we're gonna see if we can make it work. I love this progression. So here we go. 1 and we're gonna switch here. Switch back. Go back to D minor. And it's just, I know that sounds a little jarring, but you have to admit that it fits, you know, and it just gives that little extra grave seriousness to it while people are sanctifying themselves. I'm going to stop the track here, and I will come back and we'll continue discussing more things regarding sanctification. So now the track is stopped, and we're, again, I'm just showing you a few things. This is how I play. Now, on one side, I'm hesitant, like I said in the first video, not because I don't want anybody to take what I'm doing. I want you to make it you, and I'm not worried that, you know, even now as you're listening to this, there will probably be, you know, hundreds of people in Christ's Gospel taking what I'm doing and implementing it. I'm sure, you know, if I were to go to other prayer meetings, I would hear this at some point in time, maybe, who knows. But that's not the point. The point is, take what I'm doing. If it's too advanced at this point, then simplify it. You don't have to switch keys. I like to do that because I think it's just incredibly dramatic. In the most literal sense of the word, it just adds that heaviness that you need as the burden's coming down in the prayer meeting. So that's one thing that and that's, I'm not playing a song, I'm just going with chords. Now, if you want to play songs, like I say, Let It Rain is a great song because it's already in a minor key. We'll shift to A minor. I'm still on the piano and pad. Pads just give a nice little ominous quality. It fills up dead space. Nothing's wrong with the piano, but having a little pad. Strings are okay. The only thing about strings is usually, unless you have a motif, you cannot, you know, manipulate to such a nuanced way, controlling the string. The strings are, you know, they are what they are, so they have a very strident attack. Pad is a little bit more rounded out, so you can, it's not as percussive and striking, and you don't really want anything jarring during this particular phase. The great is Your Mercy. It's another one. something that's got a nice little, and most everything was around that same beat. My click on what I was playing my drum loop was about 62, and so I like the low 60s for a click. I prefer. I know this is, maybe uber obnoxious for some musicians. I like to have a click on during prayer meeting. I think it keeps unity and keeps things unified. I've only used it sparingly with, some drummers don't like to use it, so I've not had many opportunities to. And that's also another thing, just side little note here. Learn to play with a click. It's a good sign of professionalism. That's my little commercial break. Coming back into that, so you have a lot of songs. Let It Rain is a very simple song. It's in a very simple key. You're in A minor. You have 4 chords: A minor, F, C, G. So it's not very complicated with what's going on. If you want something a little bit more adventurous, then maybe you can try, in a different key, or go in F minor. Like I was saying, I just love how it sounds. It's very, just the timbre of it. So while people are sanctifying themselves, you're playing that. Now, one thing that I like to do is when I feel that we're going from intercession and brokenness and sanctification into the travail, then I like to prepare myself for what I know is coming ahead, which is going to be, if phase 1 is sanctification and phase 2 is travail, then for me, phase 3 is the low, long chants. If you've been in Harp Warriors, especially here in Jeff, you know that they pretty much have, if I was to do it musically, you'd have a half note chant from the guys, a half note chant from the girls. So you'd have 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. And then as it builds and gets more intense, then you'd have quarter note guys, quarter note girls. 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2. And then phase 4, which I call the high energy part of it's when we kind of break it up into the 8th notes, and you got the back and forth 1 and 2 and 3 and 4. And that's another reason I like a low 60s click, 61, 62, 63. Anything above like 66, man, the chanting just, it becomes very rapid. So for me, 62, 63, 64, that range right there, it just falls very, very nicely. And your drummer probably will thank you for keeping it in that range, because when you start bumping it up, if he wants to do those 16th notes, a 1D and a 2E and a 3E and a 4E and a, well, then you're going to, that's going to wear him out. You don't want it too slow, but you don't want it too fast. And trust me, you can't have it too slow, especially when you're wanting to get into, phase 4, as I like to call it, that high energy phase. You want it to have that drive with those 8th note chanting back and forth. You can't get that if you're at, 56. It's very tough. I mean, it's like, trying to run in a swimming pool. It's just, it's tough. So one thing I like to do as we're kind of exiting phase 1, getting into phase 2 with the travail and the burdens falling, I usually like to go ahead and kind of give myself an out into phase 3. So I like to just kind of start with, again, I'm gonna stay in F minor for the time being, and then go to the D flat, E flat. Again, I've got the and sometimes I'll add that little, it just kind of gives it a little, maybe foreshadowing. Again, I can't help it, guys. I'm a composer, so I think of things in a very literal sense of music, and sometimes, cinematically almost, or symphonically. you know, in my head, Harp Warriors is literal, but when I think of it musically in a term like this, or if I'm talking about it with someone, it's almost like, you know, there's this battlefield and you've got your troops, you know, preparing themselves, I guess, if you want to think of it during the sanctification phase, you know, putting their armor on. And then you've got the, you know, when they're marching to, the battle's not taking place yet, but they're marching to the battle scene. You know, you got both sides just marching, you know, and that's where, you know, that chanting comes in phase 3. And then, you know, when they're lined up and then they just charge at each other, you know, that's phase 4 for me. So, you know, I kind of, in my head, I'm like, man, you know, if this was animated or played out, what would the music behind it be? What would it look like? What would be going on musically? So for me, that's always helped. So going into phase 2, I might quicken my chord progressions. The first part I was doing 2, 4, 1, 2. I was doing a full measure for each chord. I was doing a full measure, 4 counts. When I get into phase 2 and phase 3, I'm doing maybe 2 counts per chord. I mean, I'm not thinking about it. It just kind of happens. I hope you guys don't think that I, you know, literally go and I'm counting and thinking of everything so calculated and precisely during prayer meeting. You got to let the Spirit have its way. And I get it. I'm only thinking about it now as I'm talking, because, you know, it's kind of like, oh, I do that, you know. I quicken my progression. So instead of 4 beats per chord, I do about 2 beats per chord. So 1, 2, 1, 2, 1, 2, 1, 2, 1, 2, 1, 2. And that subtle change, it's very subtle, because again, most of your people are not musically inclined in your audience as far as, oh, he just switched from whole notes to half notes, you know, that must mean we're getting ready to go into phase. They're not gonna be thinking about that, okay? Unless they watch this and they get it. But that being said, that subtle change, that it quickens the pace. And even though the tempo is the same, by your chord progressions being quickened just a little bit, you're adding a little bit more intensity. It's like we're going somewhere. We're headed somewhere, because now all of a sudden we don't have all this wide open space. We're now marching, as it were, toward the battle. We're getting into it. So I hope this is making sense. I'm not trying to be so abstract and out there. I'm trying to put things into common, everyday application for you. But I think it also helps if you can think about some things with a little bit more of an, I guess, animated, or I hate to use the word theatrical, but if you can kind of think of it in that context, it may make you more aware of what's going on. So that's what I do. If anything, I just quicken the pace of that. If I was playing Let It Rain or something like that during phase 1, phase 2, I kind of start getting out of that and getting into a more quicker paced chord progression. So if I was doing Let It Rain, then I might go into just something like that. And you don't always have to walk up from 6, 7, 1, or if you want to say, you know, 4, 5, 6. Sometimes you can walk down. Actually, I borrow from a requiem. I won't say which one, because y'all would think that I'm adding kind of, you know, all kinds of stuff in a prayer meeting. But, you know, you come across things and you come across chord progressions. So I like that. So I've added, you know, walking down, if you're in A minor, kind of keep the A and move the G on top of it. I kind of like that. You have enough of G for it to sound like G, but then you've got that stability of A minor. Maybe a 3 to a 4, or if you want to call this a 5, 6. And again, when you add that quick motion, those 16, the 1E and a 2E and it just gives it, you know, we're going somewhere. We're going somewhere. It's constantly this progression. It's organic and it's kind of molding on its own. You know, but it's not being just stagnant and sitting there musically, as well as, you know, letting the people know. So I usually do that, you know, every now and again during phase 2, adding just a little bit more motion, I really hope I'm helping. I'm not trying to complicate or overthink things for you. I'm just explaining what goes on in my head, what I'm thinking about, what I try to consider, and then what I do musically. Find a key that fits you. Find a progression that you like. I hope that what I'm showing, you know, maybe makes sense. To me it does, but, you know, maybe, you know, like I say, everybody's different. Everybody does their own thing. And practice these. I know that sounds weird to practice Harp Warriors, but seriously, practice, take some time and come up with some progressions that you like. So those are typically things, phase 1, phase 2. Now, getting into phase 3 or the end of phase 2, maybe it's gone into the chanting, and maybe you're at half note chanting. I typically save phase 4 for that, the 8th note back forth, 1 and 2 and 3 and 4. For me, in phase 3, where you've got the 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2. Well, now your drummer is a little bit more involved, and so you can switch to having some strings. I'm going to stay on piano, and I'm going to save my synth, my heavy synth, for phase 4. And again, like I said, phase 5 is, you know, afterwards, where you can go into something either, you know, dancing, like, you know, Psalm 150, I'm the Lord that healeth thee, can't stop praising his name, something like that. Or you can drop back down into phase 1. So phase 5 is kind of at the end of it all, you know, depending on where the spirit is, you can go. And I've given and explained different tutorials regarding some foot realm songs if you want to go there. And then I've also showed what I play during phase 1. So I'm not going to cover phase 5, as it were. You have the material on the other videos to go through with that, and on this video, if it goes back down into intercession and brokenness during that final phase before you're dismissed. So we're just going to talk, I guess, phase 3 and then move on into phase 4. So phase 3, we've got the chantings are now coming in. So you want to follow your, you want to follow whoever is leading, and you don't want to force them into the chanting. I talked about that last time. You want to follow them. And so whenever they start getting into those chants, then you follow that. We'll move into A minor now. I think it would be more comfortable for many watching. So if we got these half note chants, 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4. Maybe go to a 2. again, if you're referring to A minor as the 6, then this would be a 2, or if you want to refer to A minor as the 1, this would be a 4. So I'm going to play the track that I have. It's a little bit more intense, not as much as phase 4, but just to kind of show you what you would kind of hear. Again, forgive my poor drumming on my keyboard, but I'm going to play kind of what I would play during this phase where we've got these half note chanting going into the quarter note chanting. So like I said, instead of having 1, 2 guys, girls, 1, 2 guys, 1, 2 girls, 1, 2. So then you go into the 1, 2, 3, 4. So I'm going to kind of play what we would typically what I would play during that phase. So on this track, you can hear that there's more cymbals. We're going to see and just kind of play around, and I'll try and kind of show you what I would do. I'm just going to play. Again, it's a video, so you can pause if there's something that you like. So we're just going to go, we're just going to kind of play around. And like I said, this would be what I consider phase 3 of the 5 phases. Okay, so half note chanting back and forth, going into the quarter note chanting. Notice that or you can go down to F instead of having F come out. A minor to E. Now this is too simple for you. You can kind of add, like I do with the left hand, and arpeggiate your bass line. So we're in A minor, so I'm going to arpeggiate that. Just adds a little bit more drama. And sometimes I'll go from A minor to A flat major. pause and then we'll come back and do phase 4. So that was kind of phase 3. Again, I would, by that time in a normal prayer meeting, I would be off piano. We have 2 keyboards that are, if you understand the term, MIDI. Use MIDI, so we MIDI the sounds, and we have the one on the bottom, which is the main keyboard that you actually physically play. But you can also use sounds not just from that keyboard, but from the one on top, which is a Yamaha motif. Both of them are Yamahas. The bottom is a CP4 stage piano, and the top one is the motif. I believe it's a 6, an ES6. So what I do, because I have 2 keyboards, I'm able to layer sounds in a more nuanced way. Since I'm using Logic, I'm kind of at the mercy of that. I don't have faders, you know, like I would on a motif, otherwise I would show you. But on the sound patch that we use for Harp Warriors, it has, you know, strings, brass, and then it's got a low drum and cymbal. You have up to 4 sounds that you can have going at one time. So when I'm playing, I usually have the bottom keyboard set to piano, and I have it layered with a pad, and I can control on the bottom one alone how much pad I want. If I want more piano than pad, more pad than piano, you know, you kind of tweak that. And then on the top, I will have a piano, and maybe piano for one voice, strings for another voice, brass, and then I may have another strings. Usually I'll have 2 strings, piano and brass, and once we really get going, I drop the piano way down, because at that point you don't really need it. But then after, you know, you're kind of winding things down, I'll fade the piano back in, and kind of, the reason I have piano on there is just in case, you know, you have to, you know, stop, shift, or whatever the case may be, you need to kind of be able to turn on a dime. So if you've got everything set to, you know, strings and brass up on, you know, on one piano, or if you've got just a, maybe you have to layer, maybe you don't have that set up, and you have to use just one keyboard, and you've got it layered with just brass and strings. So you have to do what works for you. When I started playing for Harp Warriors, when I was playing in Dallas, we only had 1 keyboard, but it did have a layer function. So what I would do is I would start with piano and pad. Then as things got more intense, I would switch the pad to strings. Then when things got more intense, I would switch the piano to brass. So I, at max, had strings and brass. Then as things kind of were winding down, I would take the brass and switch it back to piano. So now I have piano and strings. And if they wind it down a little bit more, I would take the strings down, you know, and switch it to pad, and then I'll kind of boost it up just a little bit. So now you have more pad. So it was kind of you have to know your instrument, especially if you're dealing with a keyboard. You know what you can do. If you don't know, get your manual out, see if there's a layer function. I mean, you know, it will help in the long run. So that's what I did. That's what I would. And currently, since I have up to, you know, 6 sounds that I can have at one time, I don't have to do as much work. I do think it is nice if you can have a piano sound always ready, even if you have that fader dropped, if you're working with a motif or something like that, even if you have it all the way down, have one voice on piano. Like I say, if you can't have 3 voices, you can only have 2, then do like I said earlier. But in case you do have to stop or switch or change directions or something like that, you always have that piano, because that's kind of your glue that kind of transitions you from all the phases. As you see, like I said, I don't stay on one chord. I'm kind of always climbing up or doing something with the harmonies. I love to play with the harmonies, so that's me. Like I said, I've seen and heard musicians that just stay on one chord the entire time, and for me it just gets a little monotonous. But that's just me. That's just a me thing. So I like to move around. You can kind of see how it goes along with. Hopefully, you were able to see some of those progressions go along with. I mean, they just fit where you are in that particular phase. So we've gone through phase 1, phase 2, phase 3. So now we're into phase 4. Phase 4, I typically do mostly everything that I did in phase 3. The only thing that really changes is my voicing. By this time, I'm piping in a little bit more brass. I don't have the ability to do, like I said, all my layering the way that I would do at church to show you. So I'm going to use a very heavy synth on Logic. It's called Dominator, just to kind of show you. It's very heavy synth. So if it's too much, forgive me. It's not technically what I would use, but for instructional purposes, I'm using that. Your drummer is going to probably get more intense and going into more 16th note rhythms, even if he's not even aware musically of what he's doing. That's probably what he's doing. And the chord structure, you can pretty much use everything from phase 3 in this phase 4. And again, phase 4 is when you're doing the 8th note chanting back and forth. 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and 1. And you got the girls, guys going back and forth. That's usually what I play. Like I say, same thing. I may add a few more things and maybe some more progressions if I think about it. One, though, that I didn't do is just a climbing up from the... Just kind of climbing up from your minor that you're in. And I will leave it like that. I prefer to use that voicing. Okay, forgive me, my pedal was glitching a little bit earlier. I'm going to play phase 4 music. You'll be able to understand how it's a way more high energy than phase 3, even though phase 3 did involve more cymbals. I'm going to switch to a different voice, and I'm going to keep that same progression going just so you can kind of hear what it actually would sound like. And then I'm going to just kind of switch back to things that I was doing in phase 3, but we're now in phase 4, so I'm going to switch voices and play around. This is more just kind of me showing you what I'm doing than, teaching. I don't really think there's a way to teach Harp Warriors. You can kind of show what happens, but as far as teaching, it's kind of a weird way to put it. But we're going to come back, and I will have the drums going, and then I will come back and show you what I typically do. So what you're hearing right now is basically the music with the drums. You can hear it's a 1E and a 2E and a 3E and a 4 and that bass. A lot more cymbals. I've switched voices. Okay. So hopefully the synth doesn't drown out the drums. So here we go. So, as you kind of saw, that was what I typically do. Notice I don't stay on one chord. I hate doing that. I know I had a few mess ups, so I apologize. I know some of y'all that will listen will probably go back to go in. Take time to, fix your hair back the way it was, because it gets intense, and you can't help but, after you've been in Harp Warriors, for a long time, you can't help it. You hear that music, you just got to kind of move with it. But after that, usually you kind of taper back down and come back into, and I switched back to a different keyboard. This one is familiar with Complete. It is Alicia's keys. So I have. If you wanted to go back into the doing like we were doing before. You can do that if you want. You can go back into that, or you can play a song if you want. I don't know if anybody would do this song in this key, but if you're already in A minor, or if you can switch. Another one I like to go to after, and it's usually not in the same key because it's in the key of E. Everything. Just something light while people are, and then like I said, if it goes up again, then you can go back into that, or if it, people want to dance after, prayer meeting's pretty much over, then they can go into, I'm the Lord that Healeth Thee, or any of those Foot Realm songs, and we've got the tutorials on that. So I hope I've helped with Harp Warriors. I hope I've explained some things pretty well, pretty decently. Like I say, this is what I do. This is not you must do it this way. This is just what I do. I hope I've shown you a few things that you may can take. If you don't like them, then, that's fine as well. I hope you've enjoyed this video. Thank you for watching. Like, comment, subscribe.